Picture this. You are sitting on one of the greatest energy fortunes on the planet. Not a small reserve, not a modest deposit, but the third largest proven oil supply anywhere on Earth. 170 billion barrels, enough to fuel an entire civilization for generations. And yet, every single morning, tanker trucks roll across your border carrying foreign gasoline to fill your pumps. Every single year, your government writes billion-dollar checks to other countries just to keep your cars moving. That is Canada, right now, today. And the contradiction runs even deeper than that. The oil Canada does produce, the oil sitting beneath its own soil, in quantities that dwarf most of the Middle East, doesn't stay home. It gets loaded into pipelines and sent south into the United States, sold at a steep discount, sometimes losing $20 to $30 on every single barrel compared to what that same oil would fetch on the open world market. American refineries do the processing. American facilities capture the profit. And then, almost too absurd to believe, some of that refined fuel gets shipped back north and sold to Canadians at full international prices. Canada has refineries, roughly 15 of them spread across the country. But walk into any one of them, and you are stepping into industrial history. Most were designed and constructed decades ago, built for a different era and a different kind of oil. And in over 30 years, despite sitting atop one of the largest hydrocarbon deposits on the planet, Canada has not built a single major new refinery, not one. So, what is actually going on here? Why does a country drowning in oil keep buying fuel from strangers? The answer is not laziness. It is not corruption. It is not even politics, at least not entirely. It is something far more powerful than any of those things. And once you see it, you cannot unsee it. To understand why Canada cannot build its own refineries, you first have to understand what Canadian oil actually is. Because most people imagine oil the wrong way. They picture a gusher, a steel derrick punching into the earth, and black liquid spraying into the sky. That is Saudi Arabia. That is Texas. That is not Canada. Nearly 97% of Canada's oil does not come gushing out of the ground at all. It comes from a place called the oil sands of northern Alberta, a vast remote region filled with a thick, tar-like substance called bitumen. And bitumen is nothing like conventional oil. At room temperature, it is almost solid. Think cold molasses mixed with sand and gravel. You cannot pump it. You cannot pipe it as it is. You cannot drop it into a refinery and walk away with gasoline on the other end. To extract bitumen, companies either strip mine it using trucks the size of small buildings, some of the largest machines ever constructed by human hands, or they inject enormous volumes of pressurized steam deep underground to melt the bitumen loose so it can be pumped to the surface. Both methods consume staggering amounts of energy. You are burning through natural gas just to produce something that is still not usable fuel. You have spent a fortune and you still don't have anything you can put in a gas tank. And the problems compound from there. Even after extraction, bitumen is still too thick and heavy to move through a standard pipeline. So engineers blended with lighter hydrocarbons, creating a mixture called dilbit, short for diluted bitumen, just to make it fluid enough to transport. That blending process is expensive, and it means roughly a third of every barrel you ship is not actually the oil you are trying to sell. It is the diluent you added just to make the real product movable. You are paying transportation costs on material that is not even your product. Then comes the refining problem. Bitumen is among the heaviest, most sulfur-laden, most contaminated crude oil on Earth. It is packed with metals and impurities that would destroy a standard refinery. Processing it requires specialized, enormously expensive equipment called cokers and hydrocrackers, billion-dollar units engineered specifically to break heavy, dense molecules down into lighter, usable fuels. Most refineries in the world were never built for this. They were built for light, sweet, conventional crude. Clean oil that flows easily and processes efficiently. Bitumen is the polar opposite of that. But there is one place in the world with refineries specifically designed for exactly this kind of heavy, dirty crude. The United States Gulf Coast. The massive refinery complexes in Texas and Louisiana were originally built to process heavy oil from Venezuela and Mexico. When those countries' production began declining, those Gulf Coast facilities were left with excess capacity and an appetite for a new source of heavy crude. Canada's oil sands arrived at precisely the right moment to fill that void. the infrastructure, the geography, the industrial relationships. Everything pointed south. And so, Canadian oil went south, and it has been going south ever since. Canada's own refineries are mostly smaller and mostly designed for the lighter, conventional crude that dominated Canadian production in earlier decades. The country's total refining capacity sits at around 1.9 million barrels per day. But Canada now produces more than 4.7 million barrels per day. Even if every Canadian refinery ran at absolute maximum capacity, without stopping, Canada could still only process less than half of its own oil domestically. The rest has to go somewhere, and that somewhere is almost always the United States. This is the trap. When you only have one real customer for your product, that customer sets the price. Canada has found itself locked into a relationship where the United States is essentially the only viable buyer for Canadian heavy crude, and the United States knows it. This is why Canadian oil sells at a persistent discount to world prices, a gap the industry calls the Western Canadian Select Differential. That discount has at times stretched to $50 per barrel. $50 per barrel, multiplied by millions of barrels per day, represents a wealth transfer of breathtaking scale flowing steadily out of Canada and into the American economy. Not because of any treaty or negotiation, simply because Canada has no other real option. The obvious answer seems straightforward. Build refineries in Canada, process the oil domestically, sell finished products at world prices, keep the value at home. But this is where geography enters the story and turns a seemingly simple solution into something close to impossible. Canada's oil sands sit in northern Alberta, centered around Fort McMurray. Remote, landlocked, frozen for months of the year, surrounded by boreal forest and permafrost, hundreds of kilometers from any major city, and over 1,000 kilometers from the nearest coastline. It is, in almost every geographic sense, one of the most isolated locations you could imagine for one of the world's most important energy deposits. Here is the economic rule that governs where refineries get built, and it surprises most people. Refineries need to be close to their customers, not close to their raw material. The reason is straightforward. Refined products like gasoline, diesel, and jet fuel are significantly more expensive and difficult to transport than raw crude oil. Crude is relatively stable and can be pumped through pipelines over vast distances at manageable cost. But gasoline is volatile and flammable. Jet fuel demands strict quality controls. These products require specialized infrastructure and careful handling every step of the way. This is why virtually every major refinery on Earth sits near a port or a large population center. Houston, Singapore, Rotterdam. The refinery is located where it can move its products quickly and cheaply to the people who need them. Canada violates this rule completely. Nearly 90% of Canadians live in a narrow band along the southern border. Toronto, Montreal, Vancouver, the three largest cities in the country, are each more than 1,500 kilometers from Fort McMurray. So, if you build a refinery near the oil in northern Alberta, you then have to transport volatile, expensive, difficult to handle refined products thousands of kilometers south through mountains and ancient rock to reach the population. If you build the refinery near the people instead, you first have to pipe raw bitumen thousands of kilometers north to south across that same impossible terrain before you can refine anything at all. Either way, geography consumes your profit margin before a single liter of fuel reaches a pump, and the terrain itself makes everything worse. To the west, the Rocky Mountains block access to the Pacific coast with some of the most challenging geography on the continent. Every pipeline attempting that crossing has faced years of regulatory battles, billions in cost overruns, and furious opposition. To the east lies the Canadian Shield, one of the oldest and hardest geological formations on Earth. A vast slab of ancient granite that resists pipelines, tunnels, and buried infrastructure at every turn. To the north lies permafrost, increasingly unstable as the climate warms, an engineering nightmare for any large-scale construction. And to the south, the routes into the United States are already occupied by American refining infrastructure that competes with Canada on scale, cost, and access to global markets. Canada is hemmed in on every side by geography that actively resists the infrastructure a refining industry would require. Then there is the market size problem, and this one is simply brutal. Canada has 40 million people. The United States has 335 million. A large modern refinery costs between $5 and $10 billion to build. To justify that investment, you need a guaranteed large-scale market for your products day after day, year after year. Canada's entire domestic market for gasoline and diesel is roughly 2 million barrels per day. The American market is 20 million barrels per day, 10 times larger. If you build a major new Canadian refinery and try to sell its output domestically, you run out of customers. The economics do not work. The theoretical escape from that constraint is to export refined products internationally. But this runs straight into another wall. The Asian markets Canada has been trying to reach, China, India, South Korea, those countries have their own massive, modern, highly efficient refining industries. They do not want to import finished fuel from Canada. They want raw crude oil to feed their own refineries. That is where the value sits in their economic model. So Canada would be selling into markets that don't want its product, competing against Gulf Coast refineries that have every structural advantage, from economies of scale to deep water port, access to decades of established commercial relationships. A new Canadian refinery entering global refined product markets would start from scratch against opponents holding every possible card. Now, add climate to all of this, because Canada's winters are not an inconvenience. They are an economic force. Northern Alberta regularly sees temperatures of minus 30 degrees Celsius in winter, sometimes minus 40. At those temperatures, concrete cannot cure properly. Steel becomes brittle. Equipment seizes. Workers cannot stay outside long enough to be productive. Construction slows to a fraction of its normal pace or stops entirely. A refinery project that might take 3 years to complete in Texas could easily take 5 years in Alberta. Every additional year of construction means another year of financing costs, another year of inflation eroding the budget, another year before the facility generates a single dollar of revenue. And the cost disadvantage continues once the refinery is running. Every pipe, every tank, every valve needs to be heated through the winter to prevent freezing. Insulation requirements are massive. Equipment is subject to accelerated wear and tear in extreme cold. Repairs are harder. Everything costs more. Industry estimates put the operating cost premium for an Alberta refinery compared to a Gulf Coast equivalent at somewhere between 20 and 30%. When you are already fighting uphill against better located, larger scale American competitors, a 30% cost disadvantage can turn a marginal project into an impossible one. And finally, there is the pipeline problem, because without pipelines, none of the oil goes anywhere. For decades, Canada's dependence on a single pipeline network flowing south created total exposure to American market conditions and American political decisions. Canada has tried repeatedly to build pipelines to its own coasts and break that dependence. Energy East, which would have carried Alberta oil to the Atlantic, was canceled in 2017 after years of regulatory delay and opposition. Northern Gateway, aimed at the Pacific coast through British Columbia, was canceled in 2016. Trans Mountain, an expansion to Vancouver, took over a decade, eventually cost $30 billion against an original $7 billion budget, and faced opposition at virtually every stage before finally opening in 2024. Trans Mountain is a genuine achievement. For the first time, Canadian oil can reach Asian markets by sea. But even that victory runs into the same wall. Asian buyers want raw crude, not refined products. They will take the bitumen and process it themselves. The refining value stays offshore regardless. So, here's the complete picture. Canada cannot build refineries at scale because the oil is stranded in the interior of the continent, far from any coast, in brutal cold, surrounded by terrain that resists infrastructure. The population is too small and too dispersed to anchor the economics. The climate inflates every cost. The landlocked position demands pipelines through politically contested terrain just to reach any market at all. The global buyers who could absorb Canadian refined products either don't want them or don't need them. And the competition, the Gulf Coast refineries, holds every geographic, economic, and logistical advantage. This is what economists recognize as a structural trap. Canada exports raw materials at a discount and imports finished products at a premium. The economic model of a resource colony, not by conquest, not by design, but by the quiet, relentless logic of geography shaping markets over decades. Canada has the oil, but geography gave someone else the leverage. And in the world of energy, leverage is everything. So the next time someone asks why Canada, the third largest oil reserve on the planet, still imports fuel from abroad, you know the answer. It was never really about the oil. It was always about where the oil is and where it isn't. Drop your thoughts in the comments. Is there a version of this story where Canada finally escapes the geographic trap? Or is this simply the permanent price of being a cold, landlocked northern oil producer in a world where the refineries are somewhere else?